And welcome back to the Code Podcast. Rob Magao here. I got a longtime friend coming on here, Ari Knazan. Ari, how are you?
I'm good, buddy. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. It's been trying to do this now for a few weeks, but schedule wise, we couldn't make it work. But here we are. So how long have we known each other now?
Well, it's funny. I think you and I have different dates, but I'm going to say that we met in 2010.
2010.
So 16 years.
I think the first time I remember meeting you in person, I don't remember which came first. I don't know if I went out to your place and that's where I
No,
met Foster and stuff, or if I met you. If I
Idaho.
Idaho. I met you in Idaho. Oh yeah, Roy Dean was there, correct?
Yeah, I was a purple belt. You were a brown belt. We have a
Okay.
picture together. And that was, yeah, Roy Dean was there and one of the Gracie brothers was there too, I think. Yeah.
I don't remember him. Yeah. Interesting. Anyway, it's been a long time. So
Yeah.
16 years. So long time. So obviously, you've done a lot in your life. You're obviously an entrepreneurship mind, and similar to me in a lot of ways, I think. We
hmm
grew up in the 80s. We're products of that Generation X. Growing up in the 80s as a kid, what drew you to the martial arts? Like I have my thing that drew me to the martial arts, but what drew you to the martial arts and inspired you in the martial arts?
I think that the origin stories for most of us who grew up in the 70s and 80s is the same. It's usually like I saw Bruce Lee, I saw Chuck Norris, and that type of thing. So for me, it was Chuck Norris, and his passing just came up. And I've told the story a lot. And basically, it was typically like kung fu movies, Bruce Lee movies, and Chuck Norris movies in particular that got me interested in the martial arts because it was a new type of action hero, right? It wasn't just like it was someone who had like hand-to-hand skills. It wasn't just shooting or anything like that. And so it was the Chuck Norris era of the early 80s and his movies that kind of drove me into getting involved. And the story which I've told, I'm going to tell it again. My 1 minute origin story is that I was in Las Vegas when I was 9 years old. I saw Chuck Norris in the lobby of a hotel. And I went to my dad and I said, Dad, that's Chuck Norris. And we walked over there and I was super nervous and tugged on his arm. And he looked down at me and I said, Hello, sir. And he goes, What's your name, son? I said, It's Ari. And he says, Ari, do you do the martial arts? I said, No, sir, I don't. He says, Well, when you start, you can never stop. And then the next year, I ended up starting in judo, and then I kind of dabbled in my teens, and then I started getting more serious in my late teens and started to do Aikido and then Japanese Jiu-Jitsu and then 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Police Jiu-Jitsu. And so it was Chuck Norris that got me into the martial arts, and here I am, still doing it.
And as everybody knows now, he passed away yesterday.
Yeah.
Just a legacy that to leave behind like him is incredible. He's just an icon among icons. And I never got the chance to meet him, but I knew plenty of people that had met him. A friend of mine, Jeff Giroux, it's a
hmm
black belt jiu-jitsu out here. He was a black belt under Chuck in
Oh, cool.
Chuck's system. And I think was in some of the episodes of Texas Walker, Texas Ranger and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, everyone that's ever met him, I know Pedro Sauer knows him and has met him and said he's just a phenomenal person. So
Yeah, everyone says that he was like super nice. And the Pedro Sauer story that I love is that Chuck Norris signed Pedro Sauer's green card to come into the United States of America.
exactly, he brought everybody in for that Las Vegas. I think it was Las Vegas. They did a big seminar at like a hotel or something, and they had a bunch
Yeah,
of Gracie family brothers there.
yeah,
They introduced them all. Yeah,
yeah.
it's pretty crazy to think. We done. Hey, he led us to jujitsu in a lot of ways, right?
He
There's
did,
only
and Chuck Norris was a third degree black belt under the Machados
that is correct.
in Brazilian
What's your
Jiu-Jitsu.
What's your favorite Chuck Norris joke?
um, it keeps coming up. I mean, there's so many, but I think the one that I really like is that um, Chuck Norris doesn't take medicine. Medicine takes Chuck Norris. I really like that one for some reason. So
I always liked the one that says Chuck Norris can hear sign language.
that's good. Yeah.
I always thought that was pretty good. So
Yeah.
in the 80s, we both grew up 70s and 80s. What toys do you remember? I know you recently bought me a stomper. What are those
I
stompers
still
called?
have it. I'm going to send it. I promise.
Uh, uh, what is your favorite toys from back then?
One toy that I've been trying to track down. So I'm a collector, Rob, which you know, and probably many of your audiences. And so I collect 80s toys and anything 80s memorabilia I absolutely love. And one toy that I'm trying to track down that I love were called Shogun Warriors. And Shogun Warriors they were about 2 feet tall, and they were just plastic Japanese kind of robot things, and they used to shoot things out of their arms. That's when you could actually shoot things, because then kids were like losing eyes, and then they stopped doing it. But it was before that. So Shogun Warriors, I really loved because they were just big and clunky. The Stompers, I really loved. And one that just came to my mind just now, there was a game. Do you remember Simon?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so I think I downloaded it on my phone like a few years ago because you can now do it on the phone. But Simon was great, right? And for those of you who are too young to remember what Simon was, it was basically a round disc. It had four colors, and it would blink, and you'd have to remember what they were. So it would go deet 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 deet, and then you do it, and then it would increase speed and also the number, and you'd have to see if you could repeat it. So Simon was really fun.
It was excellent. You know what I always wanted, and my parents would never buy it for me, is a Stretch Armstrong.
Yes. And I had one and I tried to, everyone tries to break it, but you couldn't. Yeah.
Always wanted one of those, but I miss those toys. The toys, there is no toys now. The toys, there's no more toy stores anymore. It's like crazy.
Yeah. It's weird. Well, so this is a weird story. My godson, he's turning 5 and his birthday's tomorrow. And of course, being the good godparent that I am, I want to outdo everyone else, of course. And so I ended up going online and like, well, what do I remember being a kid that I always loved? And so I remember being a 5-year-old. And what kids love is the bigger the present and the heavier the present, the better the present. So I'm like, okay, let's go there. So I ended up buying him a Fisher Price. It's a Jurassic Park. It's a dinosaur and it's humongous. And his parents are going to hate me because it's a toy that takes up a ton of space. But it's awesome because I know that when he has his birthday, people are going to give him these little presents, right? And then he's going to look and he's going to see this massive thing. So I'm trying to get brownie points for my godson. So that's what I got him, a massive dinosaur that roars and all this stuff.
I feel bad for the kids today. I mean, we had Atari 2600. We had all these, stompers and Legos and Lincoln Logs and blocks and
Yeah.
it's just, the Evil Knievel. Did you have that? You wound it up?
I didn't have it. My friend had it. Yeah, that was a cool one.
Hot Wheels, all those. It was Tonka toys. It was crazy.
So
Um,
Rob, we have a store in town and it's called Cherry Bomb Toys and they sell like 80s toys. It's all obviously it's like $100 for like a little figure and stuff like that, but there's their collector store and they resell stuff. It's very cool. And I once in a while go in there to take a look.
oh, I missed it. I miss going to those stores. So going back now, what specifically led you to? You said Chuck Norris kind of led you to the martial arts in a lot of ways, but
Yeah.
what led you to jiu-jitsu in specific?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it was a couple of things. So everyone talks about UFC 1 and 2, seeing hoists, and that's kind of what got them. It's like, what's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? What's grappling? And so that was obviously a big one. I remember being at the just getting out of high school and watching the UFCs, and I was just like, that's it. Okay, that makes sense. Prior to that, I was doing Aikido at the time. And every time we did Aikido, so I really do like Aikido. I like the movement of it, and there's some wrist locks that are good. And I know there's a debate about like, is it practical and all these things. And my argument is there's practical things about every martial art. But I remember when we would get thrown, I would ask my instructor, I said, well, what happens if I grab onto you and I do not let go? And I would get thrown and I would spin around on my back. And I didn't really know grappling at the time, but I knew that I didn't want to just like lay there and take the move. So I was giving some resistance training in Aikido. And my instructor used to call me Slippery. That was my nickname because I wouldn't stay in moves. And I would challenge by saying, what if? And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I just want to know. And then it would be, what happens if I grabbed you as you threw me in an Aikido practitioner and you went down? And I'm just like holding on to you and wrestling. So that kind of started triggering my idea of going, well, there's got to be more. And then I started doing some research and I did research into Japanese jiu-jitsu. And I know that you have a background in Japanese jiu-jitsu as well. And Japanese jiu-jitsu does some of the styles in it do have grappling. And I'm like, I really like Aikido, but I want to find something more combative and more practical. And so it led me to some Japanese styles that were focused more on grappling and more joint locks rather than like choreographed throws. So that was kind of my first introduction going, oh, that makes sense. And obviously, I'd done judo as a kid and I knew that they had Newaza technique. So I was like, okay, so we have to incorporate ground moves, standing moves. So that was kind of my intro. It was Japanese jiu-jitsu grappling that moved into the watching the UFC and then me going, I really need to start doing this because it's practical.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I kind of the same way. I started in judo and then
Mhm.
progressed to Japanese jiu-jitsu and Okinawan Goju-Ryu and then of course UFC one. And even before UFC, I used to have Black Belt magazine. I still actually have all of
Yeah.
them. And in Black Belt magazine in the 80s and early 90s, you would see ads from the Gracies. You want to get your arm broken, you want to get choked out. There's like challenges that they would put ads in the magazines. And I remember seeing those, be like, what is this? But of course back then there was no internet, there was no way to watch anything until the Gracie in action tapes came out and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
it was pretty cool.
And I remember Gene LaBelle in a lot of those black belt magazines too.
Yep.
He would talk about grappling and he developed that stick. I don't know if you remember that. It was his weapon device.
Yep.
It was weird. Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah. Book. I think it's Grappling Master or something like that. I actually
Mhm.
have it. So a lot of the locks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Uh, so what led you after Japanese Jiu-Jitsu? You eventually find your way to 10th Planet, Eddie Bravo, that kind of thing, and then eventually into the Pedro Sauer Association via Keith Owen,
Yeah.
which was, the late Keith Owen, which is a mutual friend of both of ours and very inspirational to both of our lives. What kind of got you into that journey?
Into the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu like that
Yep.
way.
What brought you from Japanese Jiu-Jitsu to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
I knew that I needed to focus more on. I wanted to become an expert. I use that in quotes, of course. I wanted to become an expert in ground fighting and not only ground fighting, but just grappling in general. And so I knew that I wanted to focus on an art which was specialized in that. I was doing 10th Planet at the time, and I really liked it. But as I was in my mid 30s and moving into my late 30s, I was like, oh, this is really fun. It's a faster game. And then I started noticing a couple things. It's like, well, if I'm not more athletic than my partner, I am going to get shut down and stuff. So I knew that I was missing some fundamentals. And it was made aware to me when I went to Keith Owen's school for the very first time. He brought me out to do a seminar at his school in Boise in 2009. He sent me an email and he said, hey, Ari, my name is Keith Owen. I'm a Pedro Sauer black belt. I've seen that you have some videos online on your website called Submissions 101. And I think what you're doing is really cool. Would you like to come out and do a seminar at my school? And I was a purple belt at the time in 10th Planet. And I'm thinking like, this is crazy. Like this black belt has actually reached out to me. He was super kind. He was a straight shooter. And so I said, yeah, I'd love to. So he flew me out. We did a seminar. I did a half guard seminar. And then since I was staying the weekend, I said, hey, Keith, can I take some of your classes? And he said, sure. So I put on my gi, I put on my white belt, and I took his class. And immediately when I took his class, this is so cliche, Rob, but it's true. It's like when the student is ready, the master appears. And I watched him teach and I go, oh my God, like this guy knows how to teach. He has humor. He's talking about fundamentals and technical details that I absolutely loved. I gobbled it up. And after that class, I went up to him and said, Keith, can I be your student? I want to learn Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I love 10th Planet and I still do in many respects, but I knew that this was my path. And he accepted me as a student, and we kind of went from there. And from there, he introduced me to Pedro Sauer and just the technical details and all that stuff. And so I fell in love with it. I'm still in love with it, and that's kind of that's how I got involved.
Yeah, that's great. Keith was a master instructor. I mean, coach, really. I mean, he was just the way he could explain things and run a room was second to nobody. If you've ever been in a class with him, you wouldn't forget it.
Now it's funny you say that because I just read an article. Someone did a interview with him in 2000 and it might have been 8 or 9. So I think it was just prior to me meeting him. And he was talking about Tren and Matt Owen, and he's talking about Keith's Favorite Moves Volume 1, which is his first CD.
Mhm.
or DVD. And he has a lot of really cool information in there that I either forgot or didn't remember. And he was just talking about his origin. And he basically said, and he's always said this to me, it was he knows he's not a world-class grappler, but he wanted to be the what he referred to as the best teacher on the planet. That's what he was striving for. And he really put a lot of energy into that. I remember talking to him about, hey, how do you become a better coach? And we would talk hours about how to become a black belt in teaching, not just a black belt on the mat. And he always used to say to me, if you want to do well in business, Ari, you have to be a black belt in business. So apply yourself and learn all the tricks of the trade. And then it kind of moves from there.
Yeah. So true too. I've seen over the years so many people that are very talented at jiu-jitsu, but they don't know how to run a business, and being able to do you can be good at one and not the other. You need both. You need both.
Actually, well, that's a great question. So, Rob, let me ask you this. If off the top of your head, if you were to give advice to your listeners right now, what is one of the biggest mistakes you have made in business over the 20 years plus that you've been doing this that just pops to your mind? You're like, here's my advice to you. Please avoid this. Anything?
Oh God, yeah, I'd have to think
There's
about
so
it.
many, I know.
Yeah, there's so many. I would say not listening to my instinct when there's a problem person mixed into the group. Because if the culture is everything, if you have a poor culture in your academy, it doesn't matter
Mhm.
how good you are. Like I've literally seen guys that are phenomenal, that have all kinds of titles under their name, but their school is revolving door. They can't keep people in it. People quit all the time. And then I've seen people that you'll never know their name on any world titles, but they know how to run a school. They know how to keep the culture alive. They know how to keep people coming. And I think if you have a person in that mix that you in your heart know they're causing problems and you leave them there, it's going to ruin your business.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
sometimes it sucks because you might personally like them and get along with them,
Mhm.
but then you see behind the scenes what they're doing to others, and
Yep.
it can be tough. That they're like it's like the whole old cliche: you have a basket of fruit and one bad apple, the rest get spoiled.
Yeah.
So no matter how much you try, if someone else, you'll never love it the way no one else will ever love it the way you love it if you created it. So you have to guard it with your life, basically. You
That's,
know,
you know what? That's one of the best quotes I've heard about business, what you just said. And anyone listening to this knows that if you do run your own business, you're the only one who loves it the most, right? Because people don't understand what you go through, Rob, or what I go through, and what the background is. And hey, I'm having trouble with like these students are doing this, and this is what's happening, and bills are piling up, and all the stuff we all know, but they don't see it. And the quote, which I always use, is it took 20 years to become an overnight success.
yeah. I
So,
remember when I actually never set out to open a martial arts school. I just wanted people to train with so I could get better. And then they just kept bringing friends, right? That's just kind of what happened. And we were subleasing, not even leasing. We just some judo school let us use their mats like one day a week. And then it became two, and then it became three. And then that guy's like, "Hey, I don't want to do this anymore. You can have the school or buy
mhm.
it from me or whatever." And I was like, I don't know how to run a school, oh, you'll figure it out. And but that's it was never my intention. It just like you have the passion for something, you're going to do great at it. If you don't have
Yeah.
the passion for it, you're not. You mentioned submissions 101. I was going to ask you about that a little bit later, but I'll ask you now. How did that
Okay.
all start? Because this is for those of you that don't know, it was probably at its time one of the most watched um, YouTube channels that I can think of that had every conceivable grappling move you could think of at the time. There was no BJJ Fanatics back then. There was none of
Mhm.
this. And you had all these videos, all categorized, various instructors. You did all these positions. How did you get that idea, and what led to you starting it, and how long did you run it for? And I think there's been a resurgence of some of it recently.
Yeah, it takes so much time actually to put videos online now. And there's like tens of thousands of different channels. So the origin story of submissions 101 goes back to 2006. And I've always been in love with technology. And I remember YouTube coming out. YouTube came out in 2020, in sorry, 2003. And we started using it to, watch videos. And I looked and I'm like, there's no really martial art videos on YouTube, like instructionals. And so one day I looked at my my wife and I said, "Hey, can you record myself and my partner Dan, and I'm just gonna show some videos of some moves." And I did that, and I threw it up. And lo and behold, one view turned into 10,000, which turned into 50,000, which turned into 250,000. And I was just like, what is going on? I couldn't believe it. But you have to remember at the time, there was no one else out there doing it. This was even before the Gracie Academy had stuff on YouTube. And I had seen some videos of people doing like VHS tapes and DVDs of people doing moves. And I also noticed things like they were wearing the same color gi. And then as you as the viewer would like, I can't tell which arm is where because they're wearing the same color. So I'm like, let's wear two different gi colors because now you'll be able to differentiate between which limb is which. And then also they would show it from one angle and then you couldn't see behind them or you couldn't see what was doing. So I started to go, okay, I'm going to show you here. And then I'm going to show you this angle. And then I'm going to show you this angle. So you didn't, obviously you're not in there. So I gave you kind of a 360-degree view of it. So it was how I started to teach because of the deficits I was seeing. And I also wanted to keep it pretty short. Like I'm going to do a minute and a half video, maximum 2.5. Here are the moves, real time, slow time, and then it's done. Because a lot of videos that people were putting out on these DVDs and VHS were like, I'm going to show you a move, and they go in and they start doing like 15, 20 minutes, and people lost interest. There's the joke about John Danaher. He actually does that. He's like, okay, I'm going to spend 35 minutes to talk about your hand and your wrist, right? Obviously, I'm giving him shit about that, but he's a master. I get it, but it's just attention span started to change. So that's where it started. And then I realized, hey, I am not the expert, obviously, end all be all. So I'm going to start asking people. And I asked Keith and I started putting Eddie Bravo moves on. So Eddie didn't even have stuff online at the time. And I remember that I was traveling around and I asked him, I was in Phoenix and I said, hey, do you have any affiliates? And he didn't even have any affiliates. And he said, well, I think I'm going to start affiliates. And I said, I want to become your first Canadian affiliate. And then I started putting moves out online of 10th Planet moves because he had his books, but there was no videos. That got me a lot of views. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to get Keith. I'm going to get Pedro Sauer. I got you on. Like, I have some early videos of you on Submissions 101. I still work a Kimura setup from the side control rolling over that I love that you've done. So that's kind of how it started. And then it just blew up from there. Now, as you know, when you get a lot of views, you can also get a lot of hate.
Yep.
And I went through so much shit, and people still talk about it. They're still hanging on to it of how I sucked, how I was a fraud, how I was trying to portray myself as a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu by wearing a Japanese Jiu-Jitsu belt. So the big thing is, this was a great one. The reason that a lot of it started was because I was wearing a red Corel gi. And people go, well, look, he's wearing an exclusive BJJ gi with a Japanese Jiu-Jitsu belt, and he's trying to fool the viewer of being a expert in grappling and being a BJJ guy. And I never was. I never said it. I always told what my credentials were. And like I said, at the time, I was like that was actually even prior to becoming a purple belt in BJJ in 10th Planet. So I was just doing my Japanese jiu-jitsu moves, what I knew. And obviously I was picking up books and I was trying to learn as well. And then my formal education started in the grappling systems. But yeah, there was a lot of people didn't like it, but there's a lot of people that did. And, I don't know how many views we had, probably 65 million,
Wow.
probably, which is a drop in the bucket now. I mean, now people are like, yeah, I've got 2 billion. And so I really appreciated doing Submissions 101. It taught me a lot. I ran it. I mean, technically it's not dead, so it's still going. So it's 20 years. It's the anniversaries this year.
I still
Yeah.
remember the puzzle mats.
Oh God.
You were on puzzle mats.
Yep.
Were they red?
Yeah. So I had different ones. I had red and gray, but the first ones were yellow and green, I think was the first ones I had.
No kidding.
Yeah. So
That's crazy.
super
Crazy.
fun.
Now, before you became a police officer, you were a bouncer at a nightclub.
Yes.
That's when I met you. That's what you were doing. You weren't a police officer yet.
Yeah.
So, how did you get into that? And you got any good stories about that?
Roadhouse, Patrick Swayze. So, I got into bouncing. It was a fluke. I was visiting a friend at a nightclub at the time, and a fight broke out in front of me. And I literally like had a beer in my hand, and I ended up grabbing one guy, separating the other. I threw the guy out, and then the next day, my friend calls me and goes, "Hey, the owner of the nightclub wants to hire you." And I'm like, "For what?" And he goes, "As a bouncer." I'm like, and I was in my mid 20s at the time, and I'm like, "What do you mean as a bouncer? I'm 6'1", 100 and maybe 70 pounds at the time. I'm way too small to be a bouncer. I mean, you had to be 6'6" and 300 pounds. Like, wasn't that they hire by the pound? I thought that's how bouncers work. I said, no, he's really impressed. So I started in the business, like at watching the door, see if drinks would go out. That was my job, and then I started moving up from there. And then I started managing security groups for nightclubs as I got more experienced. I wrote a book about it, and I will say that I probably got into more physical altercations as a bouncer than I have as a police officer. It's a different type of atmosphere, and like it was nightly. And I remember the first 3 years of me bouncing, every night before I went to work, I would get an upset stomach because my cortisol levels and nerves were so because I knew I would be fighting. Absolutely would happen. And I worked at a really rough club. And so you can imagine how that plays on your psyche.
Mhm.
So I am preparing to go into a nightclub battle, as I would refer to it, and there were some really violent things that happened, like stabbings and assaults. I've been shot at, like a ton of stuff. So that actually really prepared me for policing in the end, for how to deal with stress and people yelling at you and all that stuff. So I really enjoyed my years as bouncing, but I knew that there's no end game to that. There's no pension, and so I'm like, I need to get out. So um, the one thing, the one thing the bouncing did teach me really well, like as a story, was I got really good at removing objects from people's hands. So if I asked you to leave, Rob, and you're holding that beer ball in the hand, that's a potential weapon that could be smashed on anyone, including myself, really easy. So how you put your hand on their hand, how you remove bottles, and where their hands were, I got really attuned to where these were because this is typically what causes damage. So that was a perk to the job.
Oh, that's good because not a lot of people have that background then go into law enforcement. It's usually, um, at least where I'm from, most people that are in the bouncing world don't end up in law enforcement. So I thought it was an interesting transition.
Two things about that. So one, I was on the stakeholders meeting in our province in British Columbia to have bouncers licensed because before they weren't. You could hire anyone. You get a criminal record, it wouldn't matter. You could be super violent. So I remember pulling that into legislation. So we did that. So I was pretty proud of that. And yeah, it's again an interesting profession because I think that you need to be professional in it, and a lot of people aren't. They just like, oh, it's about just bouncing people. I wanted to bridge the gap between the old school roadhouse and the new school. I knew that if I didn't change, I would become a relic on the door.
Hmm.
And so I'm like, I need to become professional in this because it's more than just throwing people out. It's how to talk to people. It's there's technique involved, and so that was kind of the interesting part of that job.
Hey, maybe since Invictus bouncers coming to Invictus.
I'm retired.
So where did the transition happen to law enforcement? I remember when you said you wanted to be a police officer. I remember you contacted me by Facebook Messenger. You were asking me questions, and I think I found that a few years ago when I was going to go to an Invictus event. I kind of found that thread, and I was going through it.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I remember you were asking then, like, what about training for cops and like what they do after the academy and what they're
Mhm.
in. And I think I went off on because by this time I've got like 15 years on the job and I'm like all all jaded, and I think I
Yeah.
played into you like, oh, the whole system's broken. But what brought you to law enforcement?
So I knew that I wanted to transition. I always wanted to be a cop. My eyes were not good, so I got LASIK surgery, and then that allowed me to actually, because you had to have 20/20 vision at the time to get into policing. So I started doing all these things. My dad had died suddenly, but before he died, he had told me that he goes, Ari, you don't want to be 80 years old and not and regret not doing something. So after he passed, that was in my brain. I'm like, I have to do it. So at 39 years old, I applied to be a cop, which is considered late if you really think about it. And I threw everything into it. I knew I wanted to do it. I wasn't a kid. So when I went into the interview, I wasn't intimidated by the questions. It's like, I'm going to have a conversation with these other adults about my actual passion of what I want to do. And I remember one of the questions, Rob, they said to me, they go, "Hey, you're a bouncer right now. There's a lot of stigma and negativity around bouncing. How do you address that?" And I remember looking at the cops across the table and I'm like, well, it's funny you say that because there's a lot of stigma and negativity about police officers. And I put it back on them and the room went silent and they go, understood. And they moved on from that question because they knew I basically was, they were trying to pigeonhole me into being, you're a dumb bouncer. You can't do policing, essentially is what they're saying. And I said, how, let's look past what I was doing because it's actually a benefit in many ways. And we had a really good conversation. It was a great process actually for me. So I remember reaching out to you because I was friends with you, and I was actually teaching cops prior to even becoming a cop some jujitsu because I knew that it was beneficial. So I started getting advice from you, my good friend Jeff Walther. I asked Keith's questions, and that kind of started leading me into like, hey, I think I can do this, and I did it, and I loved it. I love the profession.
Yeah, that's great. It's a good story, because and you're right. Not a lot of people go into it that late in life, but I think the ones that do, they've already had a lot of experience in their life, and they know what they want. And I've seen many people go in at 21, 22, 23, and then they get there and they're like, oh, this is what I thought it was going to be. And, they're not as mature maybe with their decision making. And I think that, you start entering into your 30s, you kind of know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
And
kind of
I
know.
try really hard, Rob, not to get bitter about this job. And the reason that I think I've done pretty good is because I actually have asked advice from people like yourself and people who've been in the job for a long time. And I've seen how it affects people. And trust me, it affects all of us in different ways. But the one thing, my advice to cops, especially if you're new, the way that I've protected myself is when I am done the job, I come home and I put the job behind me. I love what I do. I love policing. I love not working more. And that means that I love doing jujitsu. I love teaching. I love doing geek stuff. I love hanging out with my friends. So having that extra stuff outside of work has been very beneficial to me. And a lot of people who look at that and go, well, he's not super passionate about being a cop. Like you should be thinking about policing and how do you blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, absolutely not. I don't believe that. And I think it's bad for your system if you do it. Um, I think I'm good at what I do. I'm passionate about what I do. And when I go to work and I work hard. But I also know that I have to leave that back in the locker room or on the streets when I'm done. So that's been my saving grace.
What's funny is that when I started jiu-jitsu, Brazilian, well, I started martial arts and jiu-jitsu even before I became a cop.
Hmm.
But back then there was no cops in class, no cops. And then I became a cop and there still wasn't cops in class. And it was kind of like my saving place, like to go where I wasn't surrounded by law enforcement all the time. And now
Hmm.
all my classes are full cops. So we kind of transitioned it over the years from you never saw them in class to now like classes are full of them, right? So
Yeah.
I had to find other hobbies to get away from them. But it's great. So Invictus, how did that all start, and what brought that about?
So I'd been a cop for 5 years at the time, and I noticed that there were cops doing jujitsu in all of these different places. You and I talked a ton about it, and you're like, "Yeah, I teach a lot of cops," and I'm like, "Well, is Connecticut talking to LA and the cops in LA, and are they talking to the ones in Seattle?" And so I was looking around to see if there was a collective of cops who did jujitsu that were together, and there wasn't at the time. There was all these silos of these different places. And the one thing about police officers is many times we're really unorganized. I know that sounds really funny, but it's just like we're in our place and we can't get our shit together to talk to each other. And it bothered me. And so I'm like, let's use social media to start talking. So the very first thing that I did, there was a thread that was created. It was a message thread on Facebook. And it was a group of like maybe a dozen cops that did jujitsu. And then there was a hashtag that was created by one of the members, and the hashtag was BJJ make it mandatory. That was the hashtag. I'm like, that's a great slogan. But you can't start a company and call it BJJ, make it mandatory. It's too much of a mouthful, and it didn't make sense. So I created the name Invictus, which means unconquerable. And so Invictus LEO Collective or Jiu-Jitsu Collective. And it kind of morphed from there. And I realized we needed a website. So I had a background in website building, and so I knew social media, and I remembered how I did submissions 101. I'm like, I need to pivot to something new, and let's get these people together. So we created a group, and people started joining. We started talking. Hey, you're having trouble at your department with this, and the administration's not doing this. We all have the same problem. In addition to that, we started teaching seminars around the country, and cops started coming to it. And it was really cool to get a room full of 150 cops to train jiu-jitsu because it really wasn't being done in that manner. Yes, there was cops getting together, but it was like from different departments from all over, and we just were getting together to have fun. So that's kind of how it started, and it's grown from there, and it's been awesome. And I've met so many people. Like a lot of my best friends now have been from meeting at Invictus. And when we get together, it's not just jujitsu, it's actually morphing. I'm finding that Invictus is now starting to morph even more. Before it was like, we're super serious about like all this use of force stuff and we're going to teach you this. But now it's kind of like, it's out there. If you look on the internet, you can find jujitsu techniques amongst a dozen really good companies and probably hundreds of really great instructors that are teaching out there. But we want to get together so we can enjoy the art of jujitsu as well, right? It's not just this is how you do the stuff on the street. I mean, it is important, but I think we need to now move to like, let's get together and have a good time. And that's kind of where Invictus is going. So,
Now, speaking of Invictus, you have the third annual Lake Tahoe Conference, and
yep.
that's coming up in June. What I think it's the 8th through the 10th. It's an awesome event. I've been to the last two, and I'm coming to this one as well.
Yeah.
Can't wait to get there. And what can you tell the listeners or watchers of the video here about the event, and who are the instructors coming?
So the Invictus conference was something that we started 2 years ago. You're right. So it's the third iteration of this. And what it is, it's more than just a super seminar, is what we call it. It's actually a conference this year. So now what we're doing is we have instructors from across the country that will be teaching their segments, and they'll be teaching different jujitsu segments. Some will be kind of sport related. Some are going to be like weapon retention. Some will be police arrest and control tactics. And in addition to that, we also have something called the Invictus Invitational, which we started last year, which basically the battle for the belt. So I have a belt made, which has the Invictus logo on it. And it's a 8-man tourney. This year it is 175 pounds. That's the category. And every day we'll have like, so it'll be 4 that will fight, and then it goes down, or so 8 that fight, and then down to 4. And then the final day is the final match. So that's kind of a fun add-on. What we're also doing for this year for the Invictus Conference in Tahoe is it's again more of a conference. So we actually have a couple speakers that will be talking. So we have some really good presentations that will be happening. We have some great sponsors, which I'll talk about in a second. And so it's an overall just really fun experience to do networking in a beautiful place. So if you've never been to Lake Tahoe, it's really awesome, and we have a great time. So that's kind of how it started. So Rob, you'll be teaching there. You taught the last 2 years. And you've obviously been to a lot of our events. Jeff Walther will be there. Arturo Espinoza is going to be there, who's a local from Reno. He's awesome. He was the runner-up for the Invictus Invitational. Dan Simler, he was a stud. He's awesome. You introduced me to Dan. Love it. So he was the winner last year of the Invitational. So he will be there. He has a very diverse and deep, deep background in jiu-jitsu. He's great. And Jerry Hallert will be there, who's from Reno as well. So we have a lot of things. We have a couple other instructors that I am going to announce, but I can't announce yet. So for particular reasons, but we will be having a couple more. Plus, some of those people who are going to do the conference stuff where they're talking, they're teaching their use of force stuff and how administrations work and things like that. So it's going to be awesome. So our sponsors, by the way, so you're sponsoring Officers of Isle Series is a gold sponsor, which is amazing. We have also the Ridge, which is local down in Reno, which is basically officer wellness. They're going to be sponsoring. And we have EFC. They're going to be sponsoring this year. Submissions 101, I actually put money into it. So Submissions 101 is sponsoring a couple free slots. And we're looking forward to it. So yeah, June 8th to June 10th, 2026.
Very cool. Yeah, I can't wait. I love the whole atmosphere out there. It's beautiful, the mountains, the lake, the it's so different than where you've been to my area. You've stayed at my
Mhm.
house out here. It's just so different. Like it's like a different world.
It's hard to get people together because everyone goes like, "Oh, can you make it more central to New York?" I'm like, "Okay." So I go to New York and I do a thing in New York and like, "Hey, can you bring it back to Texas?" And I'm like, "Okay." Like everyone wants it within like 20 miles of where they live, and I understand that, but it is difficult. We try to do as many places as we can, but the reason we've done this 3 years in a row there, Rob, is like because we're trying to find a central place. We have a relationship with them at Caesar's Republic, so that's kind of why we're doing it, and it's just a fun getaway. So I highly suggest that if you haven't done it, come on out. There's tickets still available. The cutoff is coming up very soon. We're about 85% full now, so check it out.
What do you see happening with Invictus in the future? Anything that you can share that might be something different you're working on, or just status quo? Or
I know everyone says this, but we are working on some new things that will be launched in Invictus. We've gone a couple years without any merch, and like we basically were in a rebuilding phase this year. We've changed focus and how we do business and what we do. So I wanted to make it a little bit more um, professional, to be honest. And I think that's what we're kind of aiming for. The big thing that Invictus has done over the years, everyone puts up videos, and videos are awesome. But the one thing that I've really tried to focus on is creating studies and articles. And I've collected them from different agencies. I've written some, and I want to present them to the viewer, to people to provide to their administration. So they're like, jiu-jitsu doesn't really work. Police should not do jiu-jitsu. They're like, well, actually, here are the stats of your injuries of officers and suspects now because they're doing jiu-jitsu. And it's over a 3 year period. It's not over a month. So we actually have hard data. So this is important for our job. It's not just the moves and videos, it's actually research that we're trying to give to the rest of the world.
so now, when it comes to DT training and combatives and that kind of thing for police, I know that we talked a little bit about this offline here, but Axon, Taser, they have developed a defensive tactics program or combatives program to go along with Taser.
Yeah.
And I actually met the guy that's involved in it, Espen, I think his name is. He's from Norway. Trained with, we were at the Axon conference last year together in Phoenix.
Mhm.
Certainly a legit guy, legit black belt in jiu-jitsu. What's your opinion of major companies like that getting involved in the whole combatives DT thing? Is it one of these things where, hey, welcome it, or hey, stay in your lane, just make products like tasers?
I haven't taken the course, so I can't speak about the course itself. I read what you sent me because I read it on the Axon site. Uh, it is currently still processing on how I want to answer this question. I found that how they wrote it up, so they're using some pretty interesting buzzwords in that, Rob, such as ecological training. They say it like 3 times in there. So they're focusing on what they refer to as concepts over technique, which is fine because I believe in concepts as well. But you have to also be careful if it's just like, hey, if we're going to do the ecological thing, I want to, you're going to work with your partner, you're going to take your partner down, and you're going to start at 20% resistance, 40%, 60, 100, and then figure it out from there. Some people actually need, hey, I need you to do step one, two, and three. There's actually technique involved. So we have to be careful. I would love to take the course to see, but we have to be careful being reliant. I don't want to poo poo on Axon and the Taser, but their whole job is they sell technology. What they're trying to do is now bridge the gap, which is what many companies have done for years, to be honest, about bridging the gap between our tools and our hands. But they are focusing on the Taser because that's what they sell. So we just have to be careful on how this is framed. And I think what will happen is many administrators love Axon and they have great technology. I'll be honest, they do. But we also have to be careful that if the administrators themselves don't know about hands-on police tactics and jujitsu, and they just go, "Oh, here's your course, here's your 40 hours, pay your $1,500 or whatever it is, you're done." That's not how it works. So I want to get my hands on it. I want to do the course, and then I would give a actual honest response on it. But I think there's some problems that will probably come with it.
Yeah, I witnessed some of it in person last year in the developmental stages, and I liked the instructor. I thought he was
Hmm.
a good guy, and I think he's skilled. I also thought that some of the stuff they were showing was pretty good. It was very similar to what we all do. It was
Right.
just mixing in the taser when possible. There wasn't all anything earth shattering that was different than what we're already doing.
Hmm.
But again, I look back on I don't know Monognock or all these different companies that had these DT programs, and again, many of them were terrible.
Yeah.
What I don't think this will be in that same category, uh,
Yeah.
but you know, just kind of an interesting concept that a big company like that getting involved in this lane.
But why wouldn't they? Because they see how popular jiu-jitsu is becoming with police officers. So why not develop something like that? You see this in a lot of companies, Rob. They're I'm going to say not that they're I mean they're late to the game, but they're like this is how we can benefit our company. Like there's money involved in this, so why not do it? And especially because they're so huge, they can probably reach a large amount of people. We see this in a lot of on a lot of areas. So I'll just say that.
No, that's very true. Very true. So going shifting gears to something a little more fun. Looking back on your life, you go back to young Ari starting out in the '80s. Okay, I give you Doc and Marty with a DeLorean and a flux capacitor. You can go
Okay.
back there. Okay, you can go back there.
Yep.
Where first of all, what part of your life are you going to, and what are you going to say to yourself?
Um, okay. I'm going to answer that three different ways. The first one is I did a podcast on that where my
Okay.
buddies, yeah, so we called it the Time Heist podcast on my Geek Assassin podcast. So my two really good buddies, we said, what happens if we got a time machine and we wanted to go back in time? Where would we go? And we actually did an hour talking about it. We also talked how we wouldn't change time, what we would grab. And so we basically were talking about going back in time and getting so there's this thing called magic cards, and magic cards are some of them are very rare, and we're like, if we go back into 1992 when it came out, when we got the specific cards, and we came back now, each of these cards is $30,000. And anyway, it was ridiculous and geeky. So I probably would go back to the 80s because I want to see if my memory is correct on how I remembered it back then. I would probably go back to 1980, probably in 85, 86.
That's the number I had in my. That's
Did you?
yeah,
Yeah.
85. That
Yeah.
was the year for me. I love the 85.
Yeah, 85. I mean, that's the year that Back to the Future came out. So,
Right.
uh,
July 4th.
um, yeah, so I'd probably go back to 85, and we talk about all this nostalgia. All these Gen Xers now are putting up these memes and things like that, and it was really fun, and there was a difference about it. And we all joke about we didn't have cell phones and we came back when the lights went on and all that stuff, but that truly is how we grew up. And there's a carefree thing about it. The problem is we're so attached to this thing now that we forget what it's like to be disconnected. And I think there is an advantage to being disconnected. So I would go back to 85, and the advice I would give myself back then would be the stuff that I'm trying to live right now, but it would be present, spend as much time with the people, this sounds cliche, that you love and like, and try to avoid and not let the naysayers get to you because they actually don't matter. I always thought that they mattered in my 30s and like going into my 40s, but they don't matter. They're not going to make a difference in your life. So be present because the people that you love will pass away. And so I think about my dad. I think about my good friend Dane. I think about Keith Owen. And sometimes it's sudden, and you're like, I wish I had one more conversation with that person. So I would say reach out to people more. And Keith was really awesome about that. So I'm going to circle back. He used to send messages to literally hundreds of people going, "Hey, I was just thinking about you. How's it going? I hope you're doing well." And it was just a random message. And when he passed away, so many people would talk about Keith used to reach out to us and he'd just be like, hey, I was in your area. What's a good Bigfoot spot to to sit and try to find him and things like that. And so those little things go a long way. So I just put a quote up recently about how the quiet moments are the moments that are more important than the loud ones.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
Very much. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He would text me like that all the time. Just about the Red Sox or about anything. Just he was just random things out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Random things out of nowhere. It was always great.
Yeah.
So this kind of goes in line with Keith. I mean, I know you had many conversations about him about this kind of thing with him, and I certainly did. Between Bigfoot, aliens, and '80s action characters,
Hmm.
okay, which one's more reasonable to exist? So, is there some '80s character that maybe there's a real person like them somewhere, and or is Bigfoot more probable, or are aliens
Wow.
more? And when I mean aliens, I mean not just plankton. I mean like legitimate communicate, like
Okay.
life form.
Aliens.
Alien.
Aliens is the of all those things, I would say aliens. I'm a deep, deep believer in intelligent life in the universe, and I love that stuff. I think Bigfoot is fascinating. I don't believe that Bigfoot exists. Keith and I used to joke about it, and I would press him on it. And anytime that people asked about Keith, Keith would say, Bigfoot has not been proven to exist, is what he would say. But what he was really saying is it hasn't been disproven either. So we would go at length about discussing Bigfoot. The action hero thing is a really interesting thing, Rob, because all the action movies I ever saw is super impractical. All that stuff doesn't work. Like real violence and real action is so much different than what we see on screen. I bug my wife all the time. She'll watch these crappy police dramas and the cops are saying like yesterday I was watching she was sitting there and I was typing and it was two detectives that were interviewing a suspect to a murder and I'm typing away like this and I can hear what they're asking and I'm looking up and I just sighing and groaning and she's looking at me laughing. I'm like none of this is real. Like they should get an expert to sit on the side of the set to actually give most of it is crap, right? Am I free to go? Can I talk about this? Well, you don't go far. Please don't leave. Like it just got really cliche and stupid. So, and when you think of like the Steven Seagal and the high kicks and even the Chuck Norris stuff, like that's all fun to watch, but highly impractical. I think Aliens is probably the most realistic thing that's probably existing.
I would agree. There is that, isn't there that person? I think he's overseas somewhere. It's like supposed to be Spider-Man. Like he dresses up in a uniform, he climbs buildings and stuff. Isn't there some person like that in the world that like dresses up
There
kind of like
is a guy. So there could be one overseas, but there was one guy in Seattle
maybe that's where it is. That
that
is
used to
unfamiliar to me. So
yeah, so he used to dress up as a superhero and he would go out and be like a vigilante. And then he did this for a couple years and then he got beat up pretty badly. So I shouldn't laugh, but
uh,
that's the problem. You insert yourself into a situation like that, bad things happen.
have you ever seen a police drama that you felt was the closest to the real thing? I have one in mind, but I want to see if you have the same one.
I would have to think about it. I mean, I know that there's some good ones out there, but it's not jumping out of me. So please tell me what
I
you
always
think.
thought Law and Order was pretty close.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, pretty
Yeah.
close. Because I was a detective for a long time, and I thought that was, pretty close to how we would do things. But again, it's not the same. And I was just watching for the first time that new series, U.S. Marshals or
Oh,
Marshals or whatever it is. It's
yeah.
a spinoff of Yellowstone,
Yes.
and I'm like, my wife's like, oh, it's supposed to be really good, and like within 10 seconds, I'm like, this is stupid. Like, the guy lives out in the middle of nowhere. His buddy's a U.S. Marshal. They decide to deputize him in the middle of the woods and make him a marshal. And now he's working with them. Like I'm like, that doesn't happen. Like
Yeah.
she's like, just watch it. It's just supposed to be for entertainment.
Well, that's the problem because when you're involved in a profession and you watch TV about that profession, it's really hard to watch, you know?
Yeah,
So, um,
clearing rooms wrong, and
ah, I kind of thought when I was growing up, there was a TV show in the 80s. I don't know if you remember this. This would be awesome as a police thing because this is so far-fetched, but the TV show was called Sledgehammer. Do you remember it?
I remember the Peter Gabriel song "Sledgehammer." I don't
Yeah,
remember.
so
I
it
don't remember.
came out, and so it was the guy. He basically had this big revolver, And his line was, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." And he would like shooting everything it was a comedy, but it was ridiculous. So if you look that up, you'll be like, ah, got it. So that's how ridiculous it was. So Sledgehammer, there you go.
I'll end with this one. If you had a hill to die on, what is it?
If I had a hill to die on, wow. Um, okay, here we go. I'm gonna leave you with something controversial. This is your viral clip. Hmm. When cops like us who train are ranting and raving to cops who don't train, it's not because we're trying to shame you. It's not because we're trying to guilt you. It's we honestly believe that there is a deficiency in our profession that the majority of police officers are running into. We want cops to be safe. We want suspects to not incur injury. And the only way to do that is to train. Now, the argument is, well, the department should pay for my training, should do all these things. Yes, I agree with that. Absolutely. But it doesn't happen at every department. It doesn't happen at 95% of departments. So you have to invest your own time and your own dime to do better. And I get flack from people. I know there's people that talk behind my back. I know there's probably people at my department that don't like me. They find that my messaging is too strong. And I just want people to be safe. If we're investing time into become better investigators, detectives, we shoot more, we are taking all these courses, and the departments put a lot of money into us. So why not put some effort also into that? Now, what are the reasons that people don't do that? There are a ton. And I wrote an article that has 19 reasons on why cops don't train. And I'm not even going to focus on that right now. I just think that we need to do better because you're going to come into a situation in your career one day where backup is a couple minutes away and you and another person are involved. So that's going to leave you to either pull your weapon and it turns into an officer involved shooting, which no one wants, or that you learn how to actually control someone. So I think we just need to do better. And people like you, Rob, myself, and hundreds of other cops are willing to help. And it doesn't have to be intimidating. It doesn't have to be scary. I know it is. I know that you don't want to look silly in front of your peers or whatever, but it's actually much easier than you think in some ways. The hardest part of this whole thing is walking through the door. After that, things start to fall into place. And as Chad Lyman says, it's just consistency over time equals results, right? You don't have to go 5 days a week. I'm not expecting you to. We all have busy lives. Just start with one. That's it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I tell people all the time in our courses, I'm like, listen, who here, back when you applied for this job, had someone that held a gun to your head and forced you to do it? Like, not one of you. Like, you rose your hand on your own and said, I want to go. Send me to the academy. I want to be a police officer. Like, they chose
Yep.
it, and if
Yep.
you chose it, you kind of gave up your right to not be ready for that. So, well, I certainly appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy, and can't wait to see you again in Lake Tahoe. And it's going to be a great time. And let me know
It's
if you
going to be
need
super fun.
any time. And I really
Yep.
appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, have a good one.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, no, and there's three members off with the driver. No, they're just put in mode, taking them into custody here.